Ghostbusters Frozen Empire makes Ghostbusters 2016 look like Ghostbusters 2. Yeah, that's fair. Yes, friends, there's a new Ghostbusters movie in theaters, and if you've wondered what a Ghostbusters movie with no humor, no heart, and no joy looks like, what's wrong with you? Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is a 2024 supernatural comedy and sequel to the delightfully heartfelt Ghostbusters Afterlife. The movie stars Paul Rudd, Carrie Coon, McKenna Grace, and Finn Wolfhard, and follows the Spengler family as they relocate to New York City to become full-time Ghostbusters, carrying on the torch for the late Egon Spengler and the OG Ghostbusters, who are all living post-Ghostbusters lives to varying degrees of success, which I guess makes them all post-busters? But an evil, otherworldly god is about to take a bite out of the Big Apple and freeze everyone solid and dead in a blizzard of pure fear. So it's up to the two generations of Ghostbusters to show this dastardly spirit how they do things downtown. Sounds fun, doesn't it? I agree. It almost seems ripped right out of the real Ghostbusters cartoon, and I'm all here for that. But the problem is that this is just one of a multitude of subplots running amok around this movie, like those little Stay Puft Marshmallow Men from the last movie who totally weren't inspired by the Minions. Minions. There's a story about a firebender, a paranormal love story, the older Ghostbusters dealing with their golden years, Paul Rudd trying to find his place in the family, Finn Wolfhard trying to become an independent man, Winston starting a ghost research project, and Walter Peck trying to shut the Ghostbusters down again. This is where the movie goes awry. It has too many plots competing for our attention and way too many characters that do nothing. The Spenglers are obviously the core and heart of this movie, and the OG crew is a must, but did we really need Podcast and Lucky back? The movie bends logic over backwards to get them from Oklahoma to New York City, only for them to do absolutely nothing once they're there. We're also introduced to new characters who continue to not advance the plot, like James Castor's character, Lars Penfield, this young, brilliant scientist who studies ghosts and isn't needed because the movie already has a young, brilliant scientist who studies ghosts. Him, Lucky, Podcast, they could have been deleted from this movie entirely and would not have made a bit of difference. Then again, there are entire subplots that could have been deleted from this movie as well and wouldn't have affected the story at all. Simply put, this movie is juggling way too many balls in the air, and they come raining down in an absolute mess of balls. And the problem with Frozen Empire doesn't end there, because at the end of the day, the movie's just not funny. I mean, sure, there's an occasional chuckle, but nothing in this movie hits the funny bone like a Ghostbusters movie should. Say what you will about Ghostbusters 2016, but at least it knew how to tell a joke, and it was funnier than Frozen Empire is. Come at me, but you know it's true. It seems to me that this sequel kind of forgot what made the original movie work. I mean, Ghostbusters was a dry movie, dripping with sarcasm and just the right amount of cynicism. Here, we're supposed to laugh at Ray having a YouTube channel or the antics of a family, while forgetting that Ghostbusters was not a family movie. No, kids, it was not. It was dirty and decadent. And it's been sanitized over the years, starting with Ghostbusters 2 and the cartoon and Afterlife. You know, I'll make it more kid-friendly, which is fine. But I just feel that Frozen Empire is Ghostbusters stretched out to its broadest demographic appeal. And ironically, that makes it decidedly unappealing. The talent in this movie really isn't doing anything different either. I mean, imagine any movie with Paul Rudd or Kumail Nanjiani in it doing comedy, and you've literally captured their performance in this movie in your head already. Nanjiani's character, for example, could have been swapped out with his character from the Eternals and there would have been no noticeable difference. Paul Rudd could have been playing Ant-Man and nothing would have been different. It's actors doing the same shtick and not playing new characters. The ones who are playing new characters are subject to terrible writing and story beats. McKenna Grace, for example, has gone from an intelligent, socially awkward introvert to being a generally dumb person. I understand that Phoebe is supposed to be lonely and desperately trying to find her place in the world in this movie, but the writers chose to make this character absolutely insufferable by making the stupidest possible decisions, not for the sake of her character, but for the sake of the plot. Speaking of Phoebe, she gets a romance in this movie, with a ghost no less. But if you think that this is a Patrick Swayze ghost type of romance, it's more of a Bella and Edward type of romance. Heck, even that is inaccurate because Edward and Bella had more chemistry. Who told the director that two actors looking bored translates into attraction? I guess it is kind of like Bella and Edward. Okay, this next part of the video has got a spoiler in it, so if you don't want to be spoiled, for whatever reason, advance to this time in the video. This weird, joyless romance between Phoebe and the Ghost Girl, as I said, never works and is never believable. It's presented as a magical affair, but it never comes off as magical thanks to the baffling decision to have Emily Allen Lynn act bored and McKenna Grace act creepy, making the entire pairing feel forced without a lick of chemistry between the two. Furthermore, having a romance be a catalyst for Phoebe to use a machine developed by Winston's crew to temporarily remove her spirit from her body so she can exist as a ghost with the Ghost Girl is baffling. It comes out of nowhere and will probably go down as one of the dumbest character decisions ever put into a Ghostbusters movie, or even just a movie in general. It also doesn't help that the movie stupidly telegraphs that the Ghost Girl is under the control of the movie's main bad guy an hour before she makes her move. I mean, come on, Frozen Empire, let us be surprised by something. End spoiler. One thing I did like about this movie is Ray having a crisis and missing his days as a Ghostbuster, while Winston is there to remind him that he is in his golden years and those days are behind him. It brings up an interesting question that I honestly wish this movie would have explored more. What does the older generation do once they have passed the torch? This, however, only brings on the disappointing revelation of just how stale Venkman has gotten. He is a textbook case of a static character, never changing, never learning, never growing, and doing the same thing he's done for 40 years. Okay, it's pretty obvious that Bill Murray isn't that interested in doing these movies or exploring his character. But personally, I would have loved to have seen growth from Venkman in his twilight years that both Murray and Ghostbusters appear to have no interest in showing us. It also says a lot about the quality of writing or lack thereof when the climax of the movie involves a mad god who can freeze you dead in an instant, literally just standing there while the plot gets its crap together enough for the Ghostbusters to defeat him. Now, I'm going to give this movie credit where credit is due. The bad guy, Garaka, is a very intimidating villain with a great design and presence. A scary antagonist that appears just the right amount of time to retain his power on the screen, until he just stands there waiting to be beaten. I said earlier that this film kind of feels like it was ripped out of the real Ghostbusters cartoon. Garaka feels like he is a villain in the real Ghostbusters. And I'm all here for it. Let's have an animated real Ghostbusters revival. We can have the Spinglers in it. It's fine. If we can do X-Men 97 and make it awesome, we can do the real Ghostbusters. All in all, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is a movie hampered by its own weight. Superfluous characters should have been axed from this thing, and the number of subplots should have been reduced. I think that if it had been more focused on the Spengler family, Kumail Nanjiani's character, and made the romance subplot a lot more interesting, it might have had a ghost of a chance being a lot better than what it is. But what it is a scattershot movie with an army of unnecessary characters. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is like a hyperactive child trying to tell you a story at 1,000,000 miles an hour and being absolutely terrible at it. Hey, if there is something strange in the neighborhood, who you gonna call? What about my Patreons? John Borg, Juliano Toniato, James Gibbons, and Bradley Amiel Julian. If you are not a Patreon, honestly, that's something weird, and it don't look good. You can join by visiting the video description below for as little as $5 a month or more if you're feeling a little awesome and a little frisky. Let me tell you something. Patreon will make you feel good. And that's all I have for you this time, but be sure to join me next when we find out what Jason watches.